everyone. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into some seriously fascinating stuff today. You guys have sent in some really thought-provoking material lately, and I have to say, it's got me hooked.
Oh, I can imagine. It's a treasure trove of knowledge, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've been exploring these prophecies from ancient Israel and Judah right before that whole exile period.
Right, right. It's a pretty intense time in their history. Things were kind of falling apart for both those kingdoms.
Yeah.
It's hard not to feel for them when you read about it.
No kidding. It was a time of serious upheaval. Both Israel and Judah, they were turning away from their covenant with God.
Yeah, and facing some pretty major threats from outside, too. Not to mention all the internal struggles they were dealing with. It was a very, very precarious time for them.
Precarious, putting it mildly. But here's what I find so striking in all the material we've been looking at. Right in the middle of all these doom and gloom prophecies, these warnings of what's to come, there are these incredible glimmers of hope, like little sparks of light in this dark, dark tunnel. And that light, well, it's all about a future figure, someone who would come and change everything.
The Messiah.
Exactly, the Messiah. And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of those pre-exilic prophecies and see what they reveal about this coming deliverer, this Messiah.
I'm excited to dig into this. And one thing that's really important to keep in mind as we do this is how prophecy was communicated back then.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't always written down, was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, in the earlier days, you had prophets like Elijah and Elisha. They were mainly delivering these powerful oral messages. But then things began to change.
So when did that shift happen?
Well, around the time of the divided kingdom, you start to see a change. Prophets started recording their messages in writing, too.
Ah, so they could be preserved and passed on. Makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, think about Isaiah, Micah. Those names are familiar.
Yeah, definitely.
Their writings, and the writings of 14 other prophets from that era, they make up a big chunk of what we know as the Old Testament today.
Wow, 16 prophets. That's a lot of prophetic writings coming out of that time period. It really makes you wonder what prompted this change, this shift to written prophecy.
It's a good question. And, looking at the sources, it seems like there's a pretty key reason. The sheer time frame these prophecies were dealing with.
Oh, you mean how long it would take for them to actually come true?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The exile itself, that was a monumental event, obviously. But a lot of these prophetic visions, they went way beyond that immediate crisis.
They were looking centuries ahead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. They were pointing to a future that was generations, sometimes even centuries away. So writing them down, well, that was like ensuring their accuracy.
And their accessibility, too, right? So future generations could still learn from them.
Precisely. It's like they knew these messages needed to survive the test of time.
They had to be passed down. That makes perfect sense. So we've got this historical backdrop. It's a time of turmoil, but also a time when these written prophecies about the Messiah start emerging. Let's talk about those prophecies. Let's start with something that's always intrigued me. The whole idea of how the Messiah would arrive.
Ah, yes. The circumstances surrounding his birth. We got some pretty fascinating stuff there.
We do, and one of the most intriguing prophecies has got to be Isaiah chapter 7.
Oh, absolutely. Especially verses 13 and 14. They're foundational to understanding this whole concept.
They are. And to set the scene, it's God speaking directly to the house of David.
Right. Remember, this is the lineage everyone's looking at. The lineage the Messiah was supposed to come from based on all those earlier promises.
Yeah.
It all ties back to David.
It does. And at this point, it's King Ahaz who's on the throne. He's facing this really difficult military threat.
Right. He's under a lot of pressure, to say the least.
He is. And what does God do? He offers Ahaz a sign of deliverance, divine intervention. But get this.
Oh, yeah. This is a wild part of the story.
Ahaz actually refuses the sign.
He does. Tries to appear pious, says he doesn't want to test God. But let's be real.
He didn't have enough faith.
Exactly.
Yes.
He lacked the faith to believe that God would actually come through. But what's amazing?
Right.
God gives him a sign anyway.
He does. He doesn't let Ahaz's lack of faith stop him.
Not at all. And this sign, it's a game changer. It's the prophecy we were talking about. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Immanuel. Talk about a powerful declaration.
Wow. Okay, let's break this down. What are the key things we need to grasp about this sign? What makes it so important?
Okay, so first, let's think about signs in general. whether it's something totally miraculous like some of those crazy things Moses did.
Parting the Red Sea, turning his staff into a snake, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Or something more, I guess you could say, normal, like Noah's rainbow after the flood.
Right.
A sign, it always points to something deeper. It's like a little arrow, directing our attention to a truth that God wants us to see, to understand.
A divine message.
Exactly. And here, in Isaiah's prophecy, the sign is all about the very unusual, very unique way this child would be born.
The virgin will conceive. It's pretty clear, isn't it?
It seems that way, right? But you brought up a really important point before. There's some interesting discussion around the original Hebrew word used here, alma.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. It doesn't always translate directly to virgin, does it?
You're right, alma. It usually refers to a young woman, somewhat of marriageable age. But the more precise Hebrew word for virgin, that's betula.
So there's some ambiguity there.
Well, there could be.
Huh.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Centuries before the events we're talking about, Jewish scholars, they were translating the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, the Septuagint.
I've heard of that, yeah.
It was widely used back then. And in this specific passage in Isaiah, they chose to translate Alma as Parthenos.
And Parthenos, that means?
Virgin, without a doubt.
Wow. So these scholars, they were Jewish, they knew their own language and scriptures better than anyone, and they understood Isaiah's prophecy to be talking about a virgin birth.
Exactly. It wasn't some later interpretation imposed on the text. It was right there from the beginning.
That's a pretty powerful piece of evidence.
It is. And then there's the name given to this child, Immanuel.
God with us. It gives me chills every time I hear it.
Me too. It's such a powerful name. I mean, on one level, it could refer to God's protection and deliverance for Judah in their immediate crisis, showing them he's right there with them in their struggles.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, on this messianic level, it points to something even more profound. It suggests that the Messiah himself would be God, personally present among his people.
That's incredible. God with us in the flesh.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how this early Jewish understanding really highlights that miraculous birth, this figure, this God with us. He wouldn't come into the world like any ordinary person.
There's something extraordinary about his very arrival. Now, your sources also talk about verses 15 and 16 in Isaiah 7.
Yes. These verses talk about enemies being defeated before this child grows up. It seems to hint at a more immediate fulfillment, maybe even a contemporary figure from Isaiah's time.
That's what I was thinking, like maybe this prophecy had a double meaning, pointing to something happening right then and there, but also to something much bigger down the road.
A dual fulfillment. That's a key point of debate among scholars. And it's true, the sources do acknowledge that the military threats Judah was facing back then, well, they did subside pretty quickly after this prophecy was given.
They did. So some scholars have suggested that maybe Isaiah was talking about King Hezekiah.
Right. Hezekiah would eventually become king. But the timeline, it makes that a bit tricky.
Oh, how so?
Well, most likely Hezekiah was already born when Isaiah gave this prophecy.
So maybe he wasn't the child Isaiah was referring to.
Maybe not. It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
But the sources, they offer an interesting possibility. They suggest that maybe there's this kind of layering of fulfillment.
Like a double layer cake.
Kind of. Like maybe a child born around that time.
Yeah.
Maybe they were a tangible sign of God's immediate help for Judah, sort of foreshadowing. But at the same time, they were pointing to a greater reality, the ultimate God with us. The Messiah.
The one who would be born of a virgin.
Exactly. And this is really important. The idea of a future Immanuel, a descendant of David, born of a virgin.
Yeah.
That idea, it was central to Jewish thought for centuries. It was a core belief.
So this messianic meaning, this deeper meaning of Isaiah's prophecy, it wasn't something people just made up later. It was there from the very beginning.
It was woven into their understanding of God's promises.
That's fascinating. So we've got this unique birth, the sign of Immanuel. But the prophecies, they don't stop there, do they? They also give us a specific location where this Messiah would appear.
They do. We have to turn to the prophet Micah for that.
Micah, give us the details. What does he tell us?
Micah chapter 5, verse 2 is where it's at. Or verse 1 if you go by the Hebrew numbering. It's a bit of a tricky thing, but the message is crystal clear.
Lay it on us.
Okay, so the backdrop here is Micah's pretty harsh words for the leaders and people of Judah. He's calling them out on their social injustice, their spiritual unfaithfulness.
Sounds familiar. It's that same stuff that led to the downfall of the northern kingdom of Israel.
It is. It's like history repeating itself. But in the midst of all these warnings, Micah gives us this incredibly specific prophecy about where the Messiah would be born. He says, But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come from me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are of old, from ancient days.
Bethlehem Ephrathah. That's where King David was from, isn't it?
It is. It's like the pieces of a puzzle are starting to come together.
They are, and the source even connects this prophecy back to an earlier one in Genesis 49.0a. It's where it talks about the scepter, the symbol of rule, never departing from Judah.
Right. It's this ongoing promise of a ruler from Judah.
And now Micah is saying that ruler, that Messiah, he's coming from Bethlehem.
Not just any ruler, but a ruler with a very specific lineage, a very specific hometown.
And Micah doesn't stop there, does he? He says, whose origins are of old, from ancient days. What does that even mean?
Right. It's like he's saying this ruler, he's not just a human being with the family tree that goes back a few generations.
There's something more to him, something eternal.
Exactly. It hints at this pre-existence, this timeless quality. It's like he's saying this ruler from humble little Bethlehem, his story begins way, way back in eternity.
Wow. Mind-blowing. So we've got the unique birth location. What about the Messiah's role? What would this ruler from Bethlehem actually do?
Well, Micah tells us he will shepherd Israel.
Shepherd, like a literal shepherd.
It uses that imagery,
Yeah.
but obviously it's more than that. It's about guiding, protecting, leading the people with the strength of the Lord.
Providing security, restoring order.
Exactly. And the sources, they point out that this shepherding, it's not just limited to Israel. It eventually extends outward.
Oh. So there's a global aspect to it.
There is. It talks about global influence, global peace. It actually ties in with some of Isaiah's prophecies about Jerusalem becoming this center of world peace and justice.
Wow. From a little town in Judah to the entire world.
Pretty amazing, right? And we can't forget the context here. This ruler, this shepherd king, he was prophesied to come after a period of intense suffering after the exile.
So he's bringing hope to a people who have been through a lot.
He is. It's like the darkness of the exile. It would eventually be replaced by the light and security brought by this Messiah.
Light replacing darkness. Now, the prophecies don't just tell us about the Messiah's birth and his ultimate role. They also shed light on the region where he would first make his presence known.
They do.
Now,
And for that, we need to go back to Isaiah.
back to Isaiah. What does he tell us?
Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. Sometimes it's numbered as Isaiah 8.23 and 9.1, depending on the translation you're looking at.
Right, those pesky numbering discrepancies. But the message is what matters.
Exactly. So these verses, they're talking about the Galilee region.
Galilee. Okay, I'm familiar with that name. But remind me, what's the historical context here?
Well, Galilee, geographically, it was often the first area to get hit when things went south.
The first to face invasion and oppression.
Exactly. We see it back in the time of the Judges, and it happened again under the Assyrians.
So the people living there, they were no strangers to hardship.
Not at all. They had seen their fair share of suffering. And Isaiah, he uses some pretty strong language to describe their situation. He talks about deep darkness.
A fitting metaphor. So what does Isaiah say about this region, this land of deep darkness?
He says the land of deep darkness has seen a great light. It's like he's saying the sun is finally breaking through the clouds.
Light penetrating the darkness. And the sources interpret this light as a deliverance from all that oppression, right? A restoration of hope and well-being for the people of Galilee.
Exactly. It's this incredible contrast to the gloom and suffering they had endured.
It's like saying the place that experienced the most hardship would be the first to experience this radical change, this new dawn.
Precisely. It's a powerful message of hope.
So how does all this connect to the Messiah? I mean, we've been talking about his birth, his lineage, but how does Galilee fit into the picture?
We're just a few verses later, in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, we get this famous prophecy about the birth of a child, a son given to us, who would bring victory and lasting peace.
Ah, so this child, this son, he's the one bringing the light to Galilee.
That's the connection the sources are making. And they suggest this child is none other than the Immanuel we talked about earlier.
God with us.
God with us. And remember, we know he's also the descendant of David, who would be born in Bethlehem.
The pieces of the puzzle are really coming together here.
They are. It's like we're getting this multi-dimensional portrait of the Messiah. And what's interesting is that it seems like his public ministry, his work here on earth, it might begin in this historically marginalized region in Galilee.
The place that had suffered so much. It's almost like he's identifying with those who have been through the most.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it?
Right.
That the one who came to save would start his work among those who needed him most.
It is. So we've got this virgin birth, this connection to Bethlehem, and now this light shining in Galilee. It's all starting to weave together. but the prophecies, they don't shy away from a more difficult, maybe even unexpected aspect of the Messiah's story.
Oh, you're talking about his suffering.
His suffering, it's a central part of his story, isn't it?
It is, and Isaiah doesn't hold back in describing it.
He doesn't. The passage we're looking at now, it's Isaiah chapter 52, starting in verse 13 and going all the way through chapter 53, verse 12. It's often called the fourth servant song.
The servant's song. It's such a powerful and moving piece of prophecy.
It is, and it presents this profound paradox, this seeming contradiction.
A contradiction. How so?
Well, the source points out that this servant, this Messiah, he will act wisely. He'll ultimately succeed. He'll be exalted. But first he'll be marred beyond human semblance. It's like, how do you reconcile those two things?
It's a stark contrast. I mean, think about what people were expecting. They were looking for a glorious, powerful deliverer, someone who would overthrow their enemies and restore their kingdom.
A conquering hero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to hear that this Messiah would suffer, that he would be disfigured, humiliated,
It'd have been shocking.
totally unexpected. And yet, that's what Isaiah prophesies.
He does. And the source, it makes an interesting observation. It points out that this pattern, this idea of humiliation preceding exaltation,
Yeah.
it actually resonates with the stories of other important figures in the Old Testament.
Oh, interesting. Like who?
Well, think about Joseph. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused.
Yes. He went through all kinds of hardship.
He did. But eventually, he was elevated to a position of power in Egypt.
And he saved his family from famine. It's true. That same pattern plays out in Moses' life, too.
Moses, how so?
Well, he was raised in Pharaoh's palace, then fled into exile, spent years in the wilderness, herding sheep.
Not exactly a glamorous life.
Not at all. But then God called him to lead the Israelites out of slavery. He became their deliverer.
Wait, then there's David. He was anointed king as a young man, but then spent years running and hiding from Saul.
He was hunted like an animal.
He was, but eventually he became king and established his dynasty.
It's like this recurring theme. Humiliation before exaltation. Suffering leading to glory.
It's almost like a blueprint for how God works in the world.
It's a powerful concept to consider.
It is. So Isaiah tells us the Messiah will suffer, but what exactly will he suffer? What does Isaiah describe?
Well, he uses some really vivid and powerful language. He says the Messiah will be despised and rejected by people.
Not exactly the welcome you'd expect for a king.
Not at all. Isaiah calls him a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief.
He'll know suffering intimately.
He will. And here's the crazy part. Isaiah says he'll actually bear the griefs and carry the sorrows of others.
Wow. Taking on the suffering of humanity.
Exactly. But people, they won't understand what's happening. They'll think he's being punished by God for his own sins.
The source quotes Isaiah 53. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. It's pretty clear that his suffering has a purpose that goes way beyond his own personal experience.
Absolutely. The prophecy says that the chastisement that brings peace, the healing that comes through his wounds, it's all for the benefit of others.
For us.
For all of humanity. And then it says, the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Whoa, that's heavy.
It is. It's like he's taking on the weight of the entire world's sin.
And how does he respond to all this suffering?
Isaiah says he won't even open his mouth to protest. He's compared to a lamb being led silently to the slaughter.
So submissive, so innocent.
It's a heart-wrenching image. And then even his burial, it's described in a really unusual way.
How so?
Well, it says he'll be buried with the wicked and with a rich man, even though he himself had done nothing wrong.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
It's like the ultimate injustice. And remember, this is how Isaiah describes the Messiah, the coming deliverer. It would have been so hard to reconcile these images with the expectations people had.
You're telling me. It's a pretty disturbing picture. But the source highlights something really important about this suffering. It says it's all about atonement.
Atonement, what does that mean?
It's about making things right. It's about reconciling humanity with God. And the source suggests that this sacrifice, the Messiah's sacrifice, it might even supersede the need for the annual sacrifices on the Day of Atonement.
Whoa, that's a radical concept.
It is. It suggests that this one sacrifice could completely satisfy God's justice, could make things right once and for all.
That's a game changer. But the prophecy doesn't end with suffering and death, does it?
It doesn't. It also talks about glory, about resurrection.
Oh, right. The source quotes Isaiah 53 again. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. He will divide the spoils with the strong. It's like this incredible reversal.
From death to life, from humiliation to exaltation.
It's powerful. And the phrase, see the light of life, that points directly to resurrection.
He doesn't stay dead, he conquers death.
And his exaltation, it's significant too. It says he'll receive a portion with the many, divide the spoils with the strong.
That's language of victory, of ultimate honor.
Exactly. Even kings will be astonished by him. And then it concludes with this beautiful statement. He will intercede for the transgressors.
He'll plead on behalf of those who have wronged him.
Even after all he suffered. It's incredible.
So we've got this whole narrative arc, suffering leading to glory, death followed by resurrection, the bearing of sins, ultimate exaltation. It's a mind-blowing picture.
It is. But we're not done with Isaiah yet, are we?
Not quite. We need to go back to Isaiah chapter 9 for a moment. Remember that passage we were talking about earlier?
The one about the light shining in Galilee.
That one. But it doesn't just talk about light, does it? It also talks about the nature of the Messiah's rule.
Oh, right. Verses 6 and 7. They describe this child, the son given, as having the government resting on his shoulders.
The weight of leadership, the responsibility of ruling.
Exactly. And then we get those incredible names. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
Whoa. Those are some serious titles.
They are. And they tell us so much about who this Messiah is and what his role will be like.
Mighty God, Everlasting Father. Those names suggest something beyond human, don't they? They suggest deity.
They do. And the prophecy goes on to say that his rule will be everlasting. It'll be established on the throne of David.
Fulfilling God's promise to David.
Exactly. And it'll be a rule of justice and righteousness, lasting forever.
Wow. It all comes back to those promises God made to David.
It does. It's like everything's interconnected.
Yeah.
And the source makes a really interesting point about those names we just talked about.
What's that?
Well, it says those names, especially Mighty God and Everlasting Father, they reinforce the idea of Immanuel.
God with us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They also tie in with the exaltation described in Isaiah 52 and 53. It's like a complete picture.
It's all woven together. So let's recap. We've got this Messiah who will have a unique birth, a virgin birth.
Right.
He'll be born in Bethlehem.
The city of David.
He'll bring light to the region of Galilee.
The land of deep darkness.
He'll suffer and die.
But he'll be resurrected.
And ultimately, he'll establish an everlasting kingdom on the throne of David.
It's an incredible tapestry of prophecy.
It is. And to think that all of this was prophesied centuries before it actually happened.
It really makes you think about the faithfulness of God.
It does. I mean, these weren't just vague predictions. They were specific, detailed, interconnected. It's like God was giving his people a roadmap, a preview of what was to come.
And it makes you wonder how those who first heard these prophecies, how did they process all of this?
Right. What did it mean to them? What kind of hope did it give them, especially in the midst of all the turmoil and uncertainty they were facing?
That's a fascinating question.
It is, and it's something for all of us to think about. How do these prophecies, these ancient words, how do they shape our understanding of hope even today?
That's what I love about these deep dives. They always leave us with more questions than answers.
They do, but they also challenge us to keep digging, to keep exploring, to keep seeking truth.
And that's what it's all about.
It is. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey.
My pleasure. Until next time.
Until next time.